Why don't we get started? It's already the time, so welcome. I'm Tom Evans, and I'm sure we'll have a few more roll in here as I'm going along. Out of curiosity, how many here have already done vibe coding? All right.
Can you define vibe coding?
Vibe coding, oh. So vibe coding is writing code using AI. So having AI assist you in writing and developing the code. And there is a range of what that can look like. And I'll talk about that here in just a moment. So what I want to talk about, you all had a chance to experience my vibe coding this morning in the voting and the scheduling app. Because that's part of my presentation. So anyways, my presentation is going to be less around the app because you got to experience that, at least some of it. And it's more around what I did and sharing some of the lessons learned that we all can take away from that. But first of all, thank you to our sponsors. So the McComb School is a wonderful sponsor, and I cannot underemphasize that because they are making these facilities available to us. And that, in running a conference like this, is typically a biggest part of the expense. And so their sponsorship and allowing us to use this is just tremendous. Pragmatic, as Dan or Paul said this morning, they've been a sponsor of product camps here in Austin forever, and we appreciate that. I don't know Civic quite so well. I do know Product Side. I'm part of Product Side, and we are thrilled to be a sponsor also. And for some of you that don't know Elkimer, we used that in the past for like session submission and session voting. And years ago, I negotiated a in-kind sponsorship with them. And believe it or not, here we are, 16 years later, still taking advantage of it. So that has been fantastic. So big part of what makes this such a great event. Well, first of all, just so I have been the sponsor chair in two different periods of time, or a sessions chair in two different periods of time. One was from 2009 to 2012. And then more recently, I think it started about 2024 into this year. And so I've been able to, and I've been active in Product Camp all along, so I've been able to see the evolution of how we do session voting and scheduling. And at the very first Product Camps, it was all done by dot voting. And so there are pieces of paper that you put your dots on for each session. And then they manually sat there and worked through creating a schedule, and they put it up on a big Post-it note stuck in the hallway. And you had to walk by and capture what was on there. Well, we evolved a little bit. We went to where it was still dot voting, but somebody created a spreadsheet that allowed us to rank order the votes, and that would automatically map into a schedule. So that was a nice step forward. But then we also started printing schedules. So we were at a facility. They had access to a printer, and we printed out 500 copies of the schedule. They would do that while we were getting ready. We did an online version too, but people love the paper schedule. Well, somewhere in there, one of a company came to me and said, you know what, you're Product Camp. You really should have an app for displaying the schedule. And so they spent time, they created an app that allowed us to display the schedule, not build the schedule. And there were just so many issues. It took so much time working with them. We both kind of agreed the effort's not worth it. And so we moved back to, believe it or not, the same way that we had been doing it before. Then, somewhere prior to COVID, the board made a decision, let's do the voting online. And I suppose part of it was because we used a lot of paper in creating the schedules and doing the voting. And so that's really kind of where we've been. Online voting, using the spreadsheet to build it, and online schedule. But through all of that, building the schedule has been a big pain. It takes time. Sometimes it's delayed getting sessions started. We make mistakes because there's some copies and paste and, you know, some technicalities of the spreadsheet that are not fully robust. And so I've been sitting there going like, we got to do something better. Well, finally, here in 2026, I'm sitting there watching the vibe coding tools, and I said, I can do this. I can solve this problem. So first thing I did, I said, let me look at some of the tools here. My main requirement was no code vibe coding. I'm a product manager. Yes, I did my computer science classes years ago, but I do not want to look at code. I don't want to write any code. And so there were some of the top options that came up. In the end, I chose Lovable, and I'm not going to say Lovable is better than anything else, but Lovable served me for several purposes. One, it was all chat interface. I would describe what I want, and it built it. And I had no need for code, or writing any code. Bubble, some similar things to it. But the other reason is that it allowed me to eventually host this app somewhere else if we needed to, versus hosting it on just the Lovable site. And so Lovable was my tool of choice, and I've been very pleased with it. This is not the only app that I've built. I've already built at least one other app, and I have some other things that I want to build because it has worked really well for me. So let me take you through the process. I kind of had some, and as part of this, I wanted to experiment on some different approaches into how we as product managers can use it. So the first thing I did is I just gave it a really good prompt. And the nice thing about me in terms of doing the initial prompting was I've got 5 years of context of ProductCamp session voting and scheduling that I could bring into it. So I already knew a lot of the context. I knew a lot of the expectations. So I gave it a prompt. And I say, in retrospect, I think it was a pretty good starting prompt. There's some improvements I would make on it now that I've learned some more. But it was a really good starting point because it gave me a first look at an app that does all the things. And then it was from there that I was able to iterate and I go, now I can see all the different changes. So I sat down as I was just going through and using it and said, I want it to be able to do this, 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 this. And so I went through a whole list of things. These are representative, some of those. One of the things that I hadn't really thought about when it built it first, and it finally came to me, is it hadn't put a database in place. And I go, well, I got to have a database in place. And so that was one of the steps in there too. But just a lot of different things that I leveraged from my experience in terms of improving and building on it. And I would say I got to this point in an hour, perhaps an hour and a half of vibe coding. It didn't take me long to get to where I had an output that came from here. Because on the first iteration, I didn't do rigorous testing on it. I was just looking at the experience. The second one then was still a little bit more experience oriented because I just wanted to make sure it was the right experience. And from there, I even identified some other things. Like this morning, everybody had to have a unique code to access it. That's part of making sure online voting, one vote, one voting opportunity per person. We don't want people making up and cheating on that. And there were some other things. I said we need to have some security around the admin. And then there was things about, when we published the schedule, I wanted you to be able to build a schedule and make sure that persisted. And so all of that, probably spent about 6 hours across 2 days working on that. But most of it wasn't app building, it was testing. Because what I wanted to do by the time I got to here is I said, I've got something I'm ready to show to the ProductCamp board. And so I presented that to the ProductCamp board. Somewhere in here. There we go. So I did my board demonstration and testing with them, and it was great. They were all happy. They gave me virtual rounds of applause for it. And so
the spreadsheet.
That's right. They're going, goodbye, the dreaded spreadsheet. And so they were all really happy with that. But I knew then there were some other things to do, because all I had done was uploading the sessions, session voting, or uploading the proposed session, session voting, and the automatic schedule building. So the things I wanted to add into, best session voting. I know we needed to have that in there. I also realized I wanted some ProductCamp branding on it. So I wanted to be able to upload a logo. And this was one of the other things that I started to realize, is that as we move through using the app, from the beginning step of uploading sessions to now we open up voting, to closing voting and publishing the schedule, there were clear states in place. And what I realized is it was happening, but I didn't have visibility into making sure that the states were right, or that I could, if I needed to revert to a state or do it manually, could do that. So I realized I needed state management.
So are those all for you as an admin or for us as users?
It was for me as an admin to observe, but it for the users, it impacts the message that is being displayed to you. Yeah. So like this morning, you first scanned in, it said session voting has not opened. Okay, and then when it opens, you saw the votes available. After you voted and I closed it, it said the schedule is being built. And then once I publish the schedule, you see the schedule. And now when I change it into best session voting, you'll see, a message about somewhere in there it'll change it. But then after you vote, it'll say best session voting has occurred. So that's the experience that you get on that side. And I just want to make sure it was never out of sync what you were being displayed versus what we were actually working on. And then I added in session categories to be part of the display. And the only reason I did that is sometimes in the past we end up with two topics that are really similar that get scheduled at the same time. And we tried to distribute out different types of categories. And it helped me at least look at it this morning and make sure it's well distributed. So what are some of my lessons learned? So believe it or not, we don't always state our requirements as clearly as we think we did.
Speak for yourself.
Imagine that happening. So one of the things that I learned, and this is actually a technique that I've learned to use in AI no matter what, is after I submitted or created my requests with requirements, I would ask it, do you need any clarifications? Or are there any questions you have for me before you start coding? And I've learned that to be a wonderful question, because more and more AI does an excellent job of responding back to that with insightful questions. And in the same case with Lovable, I got good insightful questions back on it. But even better than that is after the first iterations, I started to get to where it would ask me, as soon as I would submit a request, it would say, here's some options. Do you want this or this? Okay, here's another set of options. Then it might go through, 2 to 5 different options or 5 different questions of options that it wanted me to clarify on. I was like, all great questions. So take advantage of that. But, prompt it ahead of time too. But it made it really easy for me to select through those different options. Second thing, I think what this is true, in our world today is we don't always know what the best solution will be. And so I felt, in retrospect, really good that I just did a general prompt to get started with, because if I had tried to over-specify it, I don't think I would have iterated through the experience as nicely as where I got to already. And so be comfortable that it's going to take some iterations to get to the best solution. All right, this is probably the big, important one. It will make coding errors. It will make mistakes. and be ready for that. And so one of the things that I learned to do with it, and then it also prompted me, is to say, do you want me to test this this change? And I would say yes. And there were times where it would catch errors. Or as I got into the testing myself, I would find things not working the way I expect, and I would prompt it, and it would go through and analyze and go, oh yeah, here's the mistake that we made, and go back and fixed it. And so if you think about, let's say I probably in total put about 12 hours of work into this app, but most of it was testing. I probably spent 2 hours, or maybe 3 at the most, in actually thinking about what I wanted to have coded and getting the coding done. Most of it has been on testing. And I was testing it just as an individual. I had a little bit of testing with the ProductCamp group, but that testing is the part that's going to eat up more of your time than anything else. And in retrospect, I would have loved to have some automated testing that I could have done, but me as an individual, a little harder to do. But that gets to me, that last point is it takes a team. I did a lot of this on my own. And this is where, as I've been working through it, I've identified issues that if I'd actually had a team to sit with and walk through, here's what I'm trying to do, here's what I want to do, I think I would have had some good questions, say, well, especially if I had some technical people with me. I think they would have raised up some technical issues and questions that I needed to ask and work with around it. So I would encourage you to do this as a team and not just try to do this individually. Why this moves so slowly? All right. There we go. Oh, that's because I had highlighted that. There we go. There were some unexpected delights. So one, if you think about what we've done here at ProductCamp in the past, is we gave you a URL for best session or session voting. We gave you another URL for the schedule. We gave you a third URL for the best session voting. And I, in just my mind, had assumed we were going to do the same thing. But the app created it in a way that it used the same URL, which from your user experience is much better, which also connects back into why those states became so important, is to be able to manage those because of the way it was being displayed to it. I had to make a few changes to the UX, but overall, I didn't want to have to think really hard about the UX. And from the very beginning, it delighted me with the user experience. But there were definitely things where I wanted to see it in this format versus that. Now here is the final thing, is it did a pretty good job of anticipating what data structure, I guess I should use structures that I needed. So without me even saying, I need to upload, sessions with a session title and a presenter name, it just assumed that. So it was pulling from some history somewhere, and it knew that. And so there were some things that I was really pleased with. So that, some of the great unexpected delights. So it actually excelled my needs. So here's just some initial takeaways is, make sure you clearly define that intent. So that was, if you saw my very first prompt, it was really around that intent. And so don't just start throwing requirements at it without giving it some intent, because it will do a better job with you with that intent. Second, do not try to do it all at once. Don't sit down and say, here's everything I want to have built. Build it in increments. And I'm going to give you a couple examples here as soon as I get past this point. So take the steps. Build it a little bit at a time. Make sure you have a plan in place to regularly test it and make those adjustments, because you won't get the full experience you want, and it will make mistakes. And this last one, and this, I think, if I'm using this more for working with other stakeholders in an organization, documenting these decisions is so key. One of the things that I wanted to do with Lovable is there's the whole chat session in there, and I was like, I want to export and download that whole chat session. Well, Lovable, for some reason, doesn't make that easy to do. And I wish I had a way to do that, because that would have been a great way to document my change history, everything that I went through, and even better help me in putting this presentation together. But I think that is something critical. All right. So I said I wanted to experiment a couple of ways in terms of vibe coding. And so once I reached this point of where I realized it was all about managing these states or managing a journey through the day, I went and created a simple state chart like this that talked about here's the different states, here's the admin needs, here are the participant or the end user needs. And then I plugged that into, I think I plugged this into ChatGPT, and I said, create a story map for me. Look what it created. That's from AI. It created this awesome story map that covered exactly everything that I wanted it to do. Yep. And I took that story map image, I copied that into Lovable, and I said, build all this. And so this was a case of where I had to build everything at once. And in the end, yes, it did, but it hit error states multiple times during that process that I had to go back and have it reworked before it got all the way through it. So that's where I go back to that point of don't try to do it all at once, do it a bit at a time.
Would you?
Oh.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like, here's what I think you're saying, but I'm not sure if this is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Give this to AI, say this is going to be the end state that we're going to build.
I said I want an app that does all of these user stories, basically.
Yeah, so you're saying, like, I want this to eventually be the end state, but don't build it yet. I want you to break it down.
Right.
I want you to build it a piece at a time.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, I think while the outcome was, actually I haven't tested the outcome because I just did it this morning.
Sure.
But I wanted to see at least from a user experience. And from a user experience, see here, it actually gave me a very nice user experience. And I almost, as I was looking at it, go, I like that user experience better than the one I currently have. So I've just had a chance to look at it a little bit. I haven't had a chance to test it. I do expect there are some issues behind it that I still need to go through and fix if I were to go and use it. But I am tempted to think about using this as my foundation going forward versus what I have, because I just felt from an admin perspective, it was a much better user experience. All right. So this brings up one of the questions is, do I just start building and iteratively build, or do I sit down and I build out a full user journey or a journey map or a story map before? And my answer is I think it depends, but kind of throw me out some scenarios that you think you would lean toward just let's start building something out and build it versus actually mapping out the whole situation.
I often build prototypes at work, but that's like if I just already know what I'm building, go straight to building, but I have like actual screens that I'm like, I do this weird Frankenstein. My background's in design and UX.
Yeah.
And now I'm in product and we don't have a designer, so I'm still the designer.
Yeah.
So I do this weird thing where I'm like taking screenshots of things and just layering them together and being like, this is what I want.
Got it. Okay.
It's a lot of directions.
Yeah. So you did some of the mapping out ahead of time in a way. Yeah.
I'm doing the design.
Okay, Carl.
Yeah, I prefer, you gotta get clear on your vision, so mapping it out. Unless it's like it's very simple, like one, 2 steps, then you could probably build, but for anything that's more complex, 2 or 3 more steps, and if you 5 or more, you definitely need to map it out so you understand how it all fits together, in my opinion.
Yeah. What else? Okay.
I would say it's a little combination of both. So I've been building something with Lovable for about a year now. I wish it was going faster, but it's not. But I would do a little bit of both. So the way that I started was I built my business plan, like 14-page business plan document. I then turned that into a traditional PRD that had some of that story mapping. It had the user. So I think it had a little bit of both. But what I could see is when I went to prompt Lovable to now finally create this website and this app was a little bit of both of here's the vision, here's the context behind it, take the business plan, take the product requirements document, and then build it. And then, kind of as you said, like, ask me if you have any clarifying questions and so that just didn't hallucinate. So I think I find it very valuable when it's both versus just one or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I'm just trying to do an initial learning because I don't know exactly what the app wants to look like or what I really want the app to do, or in the case like with ProductCamp where I had an idea of what I wanted to get to anyways, that I'm comfortable with is just start building it. But remember at that point, it isn't necessarily to get to full production code. And I think that's kind of what you said is that you may have done some initial iteration and then you said, now that I understand what I think I want the product to do, let me go and be more formalistic around it. And that's where I said, I showed you the story map that I created and leveraged that. And I feel like it gave me a much better result. And so that's where I'm almost willing to go back and start from that new version based upon the story map. Now, I have another opportunity that I'm thinking of working on. And this one is a complex process. And there's some steps of different personas or different users. And I need to think through what that map looks like for each of them. Plus, I also need to look at the data that is expected of it. And what I did, it kind of assumed the data, though I had to do some clarification along the way. In this other one, I'm going to have to be clear with some of those data structures and data requirements from the very start. So I think you're going to get a better experience from that. So I think both ways work. I think you just have to contextually think about what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Question. So
yeah,
in the previous slides you mentioned, breaking it down, breaking it up into separate pieces. And so let's say you take the build approach and you are building these separate pieces. So let's say you have the different states already built out. How do you make sure that AI correctly connects it all together, and then the data is cascading like from the nodes to the actual session schedule to the best session?
Do you want to know my response to that is, I don't know how it did, but it did. Yeah. I think that there were some expectations of it. For example, like best session voting, I said, only display the sessions that were actually in the schedule. So it was really more through the requirements that it knew to keep that structure in place. But yeah, I was impressed that it did many of those things without me being as specific as you might think you had to be.
The debugging is really cool too. So I had when I was testing, came across a unintended a payment transaction that occurred. And I just said, okay, can you debug this? Like here's how it's currently functioning. Here's how I intended it to function. Can you find the source of this issue? And it went through this whole thing of like, here is where I started to find the issue, but then after debugging, it was actually here, and that we did not disclose a button type, which was causing the behavior to do it. And so it was like, I'm gonna go ahead and fix this, and then it fixed it. And that was all within like 2 minutes.
Yeah, and that's my same experience is when
a story in Jira, and then a task, and then a bug, and then I'll have to triage in weeks.
Yeah, well, and that's a really good point, but
the bucket class.
But that is my experience there, is where when I saw the issue or something wasn't behaving the way that I wanted to, I just described it to it.
Yeah.
And I think there were once or twice where I did get an error message and I just copied it in. And it went through and figured that out, so.
Yeah, I'm excited about this slide because this is why I came here. Like, I was like, oh, you did this in Lovable, but like, it's actually in production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the point that I want to leave you with, or I have one other slide I want to do there. But here, exactly, yeah. For this type of scale, in terms of what we did today, I was a lot more comfortable in doing this in production.
Yeah.
But would I push this out as all product camps, you ought to use this? I'm not going to do that. And I think as a product manager, we want to focus more on using it for us to build out prototypes versus production systems. Now, obviously, we have some exceptions here, but I would say in most of our work, our goal isn't production code. It is prototypes that we can validate and then be able to use that to communicate requirements to our development team. So this is kind of my message here. As much as possible, our focus is not production software. And here's the reason you want to engage engineering. I was talking to a friend this week who is an engineer, and he's working on his own app. And we talked about these points right here. The AI vibe coding on itself is not going to give you all the level of scalability, security. The way that it codes and creates the architecture is, at least right now, is not necessarily going to be optimal. You're going to end up with tech debt in there, and it may get in the way of doing things in the future. And it does. This is where the engineers are really valuable because they're going to think through the edge case. And I'll just disclose to you a little bit this morning, we experienced a bit of an edge case during the voting process. And I saw that it was happening. After the voting, I went back and it's now fixed because we experienced it, but it wasn't something that I would have ever identified as a product manager, but an engineer would have identified it.
What was the edge case?
So people didn't show up?
No, it had to do with the sessions being submitted, or the voting, how the votings were being submitted. And so, there were some voters not counted, but let's just say I feel confident our voting was representative of the whole group, what the group was looking for.
That's a big issue that you came up and said, hey, who didn't submit?
Yeah, exactly, because it wasn't showing as many vote counts as I expected to see.
Gotcha.
No, and I just want to say very quickly, so I own a software development company, and it is night and day having a client that has validated what they want to do with some kind of like prototype of some sort, and someone that comes just like, hey, I've got an idea and I want to do.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
All over the place, and so I appreciate what it's done for people to kind of validate the idea that they have, create some kind of prototype, and then we take on from there.
And I think you as product managers, exactly, if you come in and show the development team, I'm not here to take your job, but this is going to help you better understand the experience that I want to do. So here's the last,
We'll take some jobs.
the last full slide I have here. So one, in case you haven't done this, but what I did is I did I downloaded all the code. And again, I couldn't download the code very well from Lovable, but I linked it up to GitHub. From GitHub, I downloaded it. I threw it into probably ChatGPT. And I said, using this code, write out all of the user stories for me. Imagine using your prototype as your first set of user stories. I would not have used that for production. Now, I actually did take those user stories and had it just code the app. I think it coded what worked. It wasn't nearly as functional as what I already have. From the user experience, it didn't look nearly as good. So anyways, you can do that. This is just some of the cool stuff you can do. Or take the code and say, build out the story map for me, and let me go and then adjust the story map. So there's great ways that you can accelerate your work from the prototype to how you communicate this to engineers.
Say that again. So you took the code from Lovable,
Yeah.
put that into
Chat GPT and say, write the user stories for me.
Those stories back into Lovable and stuff.
And had it recoded again, yeah.
Just to compare and contrast.
Just to compare and contrast. But, yeah, so I would not recommend that you, I would recommend you do that to get a first draft of user stories, but then you sit down and you run it through your regular backlog refinement process and, you know, all the rest of the stuff before you actually put them into, you know, Edgear or wherever for working on it. Yeah, but it's a great way. If you already got the prototype, get a first draft of the user stories.
So what we used today, was it the prototype or?
What we used today was the one that I had been working on for the last 2 months and had done all the testing on.
And did you have to do anything to make sure it didn't crash when 100 people used it today?
I asked it to test itself and guarantee me that it wasn't going to crash, and it said it would do that. What I wish I could have done is, and it couldn't test itself scaling, but this is where I would have had to use an outside app to run against it and run a scalability test. And that just, it was a bit beyond my capabilities at that time.
You told that you expected 100 votes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You couldn't actually hit it with 100 votes.
Yeah, it did some overwriting is basically what was happening.
So were we just using the direct link that you got straight out of Lovable, or did you have to put something on GitHub to then host?
No. What I did is when you publish it, you just publish it to a URL.
Oh, and we
Yeah, and this happens to be a URL, you know, the executable code hosted on Lovable.
And then where was the data being, like where did the data set?
There's a database. It's using
SQLite.
no Supra. I think it's using Supra on Lovable. Yeah. Yeah.
Lovable is what you use.
Yeah. So Lovable is hosting the data, the back end,
Nice. Okay.
you know, the front end experience.
You
Yeah.
heard of Supra before this process?
I probably had heard of it, but I'd never even thought much about it.
I'm like using Netlify and Versal now. Like, I never knew what these things were. Yeah, it's telling me to use these things.
Hey, we're way over time, but thank you so much. This was a fun discussion. Yeah, thank you so much.